Here is the original Elgato Game Capture HD, capturing GameCube footage in 480p inside of CachyOS Linux. This is a weird way to go about capturing gameplay, but it's possible. And the crazy thing is that I'm just now finding out about a community-built driver for this old card 10 years after its last update and being abandoned. I have fond memories of my original Elgato Game Capture HD, allowing me clean HDMI capture long before anybody else, basically. Some passable retro captures and even PS3 capture for those who hadn't discovered the right HDMI splitter yet. In 2013 or 2014, I even had two of these strapped together so I could get both a live stream and a clean recording feed of my gameplay going at once. All that being said, I certainly wouldn't call the Game Capture HD a good card in 2026, and I would not suggest going and buying it. It pre-compresses the footage to H.264 before sending it to your computer, which results in high latency and lower quality, and it doesn't handle 480i all that well. But if you have one and just want to use it, head to the GitHub link in the description. So the first step will be to make sure that you have 7-zip or P7-zip, libUSB, CMake, and Make installed on your system. For CachyOS, I checked these in Octopi, and I still needed to install CMake, which of course meant updating everything in my laptop here and waiting for that to finish and then rebooting. Following that, I made a Programs folder in my User folder and an Elgato GCHD folder inside of that. Open your target folder in a terminal, use Git to clone the repository or just download it from the website and unzip that archive. Next, we have to open the CMake lists.txt file in a text editor and change the CMake minimum version to 3.5 or something higher, as a change was made sometime in the last 10 years within CMake that breaks compatibility with older files. Literally just changing the version in this text file here fixes it. Make a build folder in here, open it, and run cmake space ... Then when that is done, run make. Once this is done, we need to download the Windows installer for the original Elgato Game Capture HD from Elgato's website to get the firmware. Put the .msi file for the installer in the firmware_extract folder, then open that folder in the terminal and run /extract_firmware_Windows command. Extract the resulting tar file and, using sudo, move the two firmware files to /user/lib/firmware/gchd. You'll need to make that last part of the folder. Now you can navigate to the /build/source folder in your original download folder here and run ./gchd as sudo to run the driver software. With this command, you have various options. -I is for input, where you can specify HDMI, component, or composite. Not using this option auto-selects the input, but may run into trouble if you have multiple things plugged into it. -C sets the color space between YUV or RGB for the HDMI and component inputs, which again, I really probably wouldn't mess with by default. -OF allows you to choose a disk file, a socket to feed to a UDP stream with, which is going to be your best way to open that up in another streaming program, or a FIFO, first in, first out file, which is only used temporarily for loading into something like VLC or OBS. This would work great traditionally inside of OBS, as you would just add that .ts file it creates as a media source, and then you could stream to OBS. However, at least on my installation, I found that OBS crashes every time I add the TS file as a media source, and I could never actually get it working. By default, if you put in no options or anything, a FIFO file will be written, which cannot be used once the program is done because no bytes are actually written to the final file. So you want to use -OF disk and then a file name if you're actually trying to record to a file here. -OR lets you specify the output resolution, but again, for a card like this, you should leave it on auto to match the input resolution and not actually change it here. If you want to upscale or do whatever, do that in video editing to match the input resolution and not use this. -BR lets you specify a bitrate up to the max of 40 megabits per second. I, of course, recommend maxing this out. Without more advanced tweaking, this tool must be run as sudo, as I mentioned before, so make sure you're doing that. So my command for recording my GameCube with HDMI out is sudo /gchd -I HDMI -BR40 -OF disk /home/addy/videos/ say Mario Kart.mp4. It appears you can use .ts, .mp4, or .mkv containers with this, though I'm not sure if the MKV format would work in other programs. I haven't had any issues so far, but your mileage may vary. .ts is the default supported container. It starts dumping to file, or you could load the .ts using FIFO as a media source in OBS, if that worked for you for capture or for streaming, and then hit Control-C to end the session before closing your terminal. Since the capture card does encode on the card to H.264 and pre-compress before it hits your system, there is no advantage to trying to capture with something like OBS rather than just dumping to file here. So I wouldn't really stress about building a FIFO, piping that into OBS, and then recording in OBS if you just plan on recording. That's only useful if you plan on streaming specifically and need, overlays and everything else. If you don't hit Control-C at the end of your session before closing the terminal, assuming your terminal doesn't hit that for you, basically, the file won't finish writing, and the driver could get stuck until you unplug and replug the device, so keep that in mind. If you're worried about not remembering to do that and just closing the terminal or turning off your computer or something, you could make sure you're writing to an MKV container, which is going to be a little more protected against corruption. Again, I wouldn't recommend buying one of these for Linux or at all in 2026 and beyond, but if you already have one and it's been on the list of things keeping you stuck on Windows, give it a go. Unfortunately, this project has been updated to note that it has been discontinued about 10 years ago, which means the planned support for the HD60 and HD60 Pro will never come to light. But hopefully, like the 4K 60 Pro Mark II driver being built off of the work of others, someone can pick this up and continue it one day. Sound off the forums with how it's treating you, and remember to be kind, rewind.